Hi, this is James from Strummer Design, and I like making things out of leather, but I especially like it when my stitching comes out awesome. In this video, I'll show you all about a jig that I made that helps me make perfectly consistent and perpendicular holes in my leather work pieces. Great stitching starts with great stitching holes, and in order to get great stitching holes, you need to do these two things. First, you need to make sure you're always holding your stitching iron at a perfect 90 degrees to your workpiece. And second, you have to make sure that the teeth on your stitching iron are always perfectly aligned with your stitch line for every set of holes that you make. Sounds simple enough, but it's easier said than done. You might be familiar with this heartbreaking scenario. You're working on a new leather project. You've painstakingly cut your pieces based on a pattern. You've glued them up. You've made your stitch line. You've used your stitching iron to make your stitching holes, and everything's looking great until you flip it over and you see that your holes are misaligned. So, why does this happen? Well, the main reason is probably that as you were making your holes with your stitching iron, you weren't holding the stitching iron at a perfect 90 degrees. If it's not at a perfect 90 degrees, the holes, the entry holes at the top, are not going to be perfectly aligned with the exit holes on the bottom of the workpiece. And to make matters worse, the thicker your leather or the greater the number of layers of leather you're going through, the greater and more pronounced that misalignment is going to be. So there's got to be a better solution, I thought. I knew exactly what I needed, but I couldn't find a tool to help me do it. What I need is a tool that will always help me hold my stitching iron at a perfect 90 degrees. It'll make sure that my stitching iron is always parallel to the stitching line that I've made. It should be able to be adjustable for multiple layers and multiple thicknesses of leather, and it should be adjustable for how wide of an allowance I want for my stitch line. And it should do all these things so that I waste less leather, and probably most importantly, I can make higher quality leather products even faster. I searched high and low for this kind of a tool, but I couldn't find anything good enough, so I decided to make it myself. And after a couple of months of experimentation and prototyping, I came up with this, my leather stitching iron jig. Let me show you how it works. Let's start with a tour of the stitching iron jig. It's made of solid walnut, and it's finished in a natural, food-safe finish. Here is an adjustable fence. This is used for setting your stitch width or your stitch border width. We have two magnets here, which are very useful for holding your stitching iron while you're setting up and while you're aligning where you want to make your stitch marks. It's at a perfect 90 degrees. Here's how it works with various stitching irons. This is a Weaver 3mm. It fits on there perfectly. We have a cheapy Amazon 4mm 6-tooth. And this here is a Kevin Lee 4mm 10-tooth, and it fits perfectly as well. Now let me show you how to set it up and use it on a leather project. So what we have here, we have a sample project workpiece. It's just two pieces of fine leather that are already contact cemented together along the edge, and I've made a 4mm stitch line. So this is where we want to put our stitch holes in just a moment. We have two scrap pieces of leather of the exact same leather here. They're actually four, but they're glued together. So we have basically exactly the same thickness between our workpiece and these two pieces of scrap. These two pieces of scrap are going to be affixed to the bottom of the jig here. And this is how you set up the jig for the thickness of leather that you're working on, or the thickness of the layers of leather that you're working on. And we affix this. There are multiple ways you can do it, but I use double-sided tape to fix these pieces to the bottom of the jig. I'll do that now. Now we have our scrap shims of leather affixed to the bottom of the jig. These will peel off really, really easily, so you can reuse the jig for other purposes and other projects. Now when we put it down flat on your work surface, it's very sturdy and there's no rocking back and forth. The jig main platform is now parallel to your work surface, and it's also parallel to your project piece, and the vertical panel here is perfectly perpendicular to your workpiece. Now let's go through how to set up the adjustable fence here for the stitch width that you want to use. So we've already made our 4mm stitch mark, and let's use this stitching iron here. And you can see how it sticks to the magnets here, which basically acts as a third hand, which is really useful when you're going through this part of the process to get the fence perfectly positioned for your stitch marks. Okay, we're zoomed in so we can see things a little bit better. We have our stitching iron attached to the magnets on the vertical part of the jig. We have the aluminum fence is loose underneath so that when the leather is pushed up against the aluminum fence, the body of the jig can slide freely back and forth. Now, looking from above, we move the body of the jig until the teeth of the stitching iron are aligned perfectly with your stitching line. And once you've got that where you like it, you turn the knob to lock the fence in place. And now that we're locked in, no matter where you put the jig up against the edge of the leather, the teeth of the stitching iron are always going to be perfectly aligned with your stitching line. Now we're ready to put our holes in our workpiece. I've reconfigured the work surface here. I've got our stone slab, we've got our hard plastic sheet, we've got a piece of scrap leather, our workpiece, and our jig that we've all set up to make holes perfectly along our stitch line that we've made here. So what you do is you make sure that the stitching iron is up above the surface of the leather. Slide your piece up against the fence. Slide your iron down. Make your marks. Slide the jig down. Line up one or two of your holes. Make your marks. Slide the jig down. Line up one or two of your holes. Make your marks. And so on and so forth until you've made all the marks you need to along your stitch line. So as you can see, we've made holes nicely along our stitch line here. And on the other side of the piece, you can see they're equally straight and consistent as well along this other side as well. So when you stitch that together, it's going to look really great on both sides of your workpiece. I'll do some remarkably fast stitching here so we can get an idea of what the end product will look like on both sides. This is the side with the stitch line. And this is the exit hole side. And that's how easy it is to use the Strummer stitch iron jig. To learn more and to see how you can purchase your own jig, visit strummerdesign.com. Thanks for watching.